Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 2 of the Jason Nellis Show. I am shockingly your host, Jason Nellis. And with me today is another Jason, a Jason of esteem, a Jason of charm, a Jason of, dare we say it, better hair than myself. It's our friend Jason T. Lewis, who you might know as Painfully Honest Tech. Jason, good to see you, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jason. Yeah, here we are. It's it's yet another day in paradise, isn't it?
It is indeed a phrase I use far too often myself, actually. Yeah, between noise issues on my side and connectivity issues on your side and disabled cameras, this is a solid start, my friend.
I learned something. Cameras need power.
You know, I think that's a lesson we can all take to the bank.
Yes. That's my lesson for your audience today. Cameras need power.
I like it. I'm going to turn that into a TikTok. Well, I'd love to jump right in. I know you. Well, I've known you for a while now. In fact, I think I started chatting with you right at the beginning of the apex of your YouTube career. Can you tell me a little bit how you started? What inspired you to start producing content?
Well, interestingly enough, I just really kind of was always interested in YouTube. And the first review of a product I ever did on YouTube was the Kindle 2. And I think that was like 2010 or something. It was, 2009. It was a long time ago. And it was awful. It's still on my channel, but definitely not visible to anyone.
If you send me the video, I'll happily, I'll play it as B-roll over this if you want.
Oh, no, I don't think we want to do that because I had no idea what I was doing. But really what ended up happening was I just had a lot more time on my hands. I quit drinking and I wasn't going out and being social as much. And I just kind of was like, oh, YouTube is kind of all the things that I've done. I've been a musician, so audio, and I've been a performer, so there's like the video thing, and a writer, and so I like to do the scripting, and so it just was kind of a way to start to do something. But what really got me going was when the PlayStation 4 came out. I wanted to play.
Oh yeah,
I wanted to play Battlefield 4 with a friend of mine from college, and I'd never had a gaming headset. So I went to Best Buy. I did some research. I watched some YouTube videos, some by people that I now know, and I have not yet called them out on this. But I went and got one that was about $75. Got pretty good reviews from most of the people that I looked at, and they were awful. They were. It was like wearing 2 trash can lids on your ears, and I got kind of upset, and so I made a video about it, and. I just kept going to Best Buy and getting other gaming headsets and making videos about them. And next thing you know, it's just something that I do. So, yeah.
I think one of the things about your story that is particularly interesting to me, and I hope you don't feel called out by this, but you're not a young man. You're a man who, you're at least 25, at least. But more importantly, we see so many young creators in the tech review space, folks that are 16 to probably 21, right? Who are really young, really tech forward. You've had a tremendous amount of experience in audio technology, and you're a musician. You have a lot of strong opinions that aren't just based in sort of what's new and hot, but a fairly deep history on how this technology has evolved. Do you think that makes your perspective more than just different? Is it particularly unique in some way? Or is it just that you can sort of contextualize it with a little bit of a deeper bench than a lot of folks?
I think the context thing is what's really important, because like you said, a lot of folks are still relatively young. I mean, and full disclosure, I'm 51 years old. But I have been doing this.
And you don't look a day over 50, let me tell you.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to get so much hate mail for that.
So it's interesting, like, because I grew up with this, being a Generation X person. I grew up with all of this technology as it from its genesis to the current day. You know, I my first Mac was I got my first Mac in 1991, and I was 18 years old. You know, so I've just had a long history of how this stuff works, and I think that the context of it is a good thing to have in the conversation, because a lot of folks who are only just beginning their journey in the conversation don't have that, like, well, it used to be like this, and this is why we say this. I like one thing that I get when I talk about Macs and PCs. A lot of times, and I'm assuming it's some younger commenters will be like, why do you call it a PC? I'm like, well, back in the day, they're of course, yes, they're both personal computers, but back in the day it was Mac and PC, and there was a very strong line between the two, and that was the war that came before Android versus iPhone. So the 90s was about Android versus iPhone, and the 2000ish 2010s were about Android versus iPhone. And so I think now we've come out on the other side where, but you can use a PC or a Mac to do all the same things, and it's just maybe a lifestyle or a stylistic, like how you work kind of choice. But back in the day, if you were a musician or an audio producer or a graphic designer or somebody like that, you could not use a PC because the programs weren't available on that platform. So, and now you can use all of that stuff. Adobe and everything else is on all the platforms. So yeah, it definitely influences the way that I think about it. And I just made a video today about how the iPad has kind of, in my mind, run its course, because when the iPad first came out, 10 plus years ago, the iPad was a bigger iPhone, and it gave you more opportunities to enjoy content in a different scale, right? But now Apple sells an iPad that costs $2,200 without a keyboard, and it has the same internals as the newer MacBook Airs and MacBook Pro 13s. And when you start to do that, to me, like, I look at the iPad OS and Mac OS and think, like, iPad OS is a very poor cousin to Mac OS. And so when we start spending that much money, it just doesn't make sense to me to have a device that is is all that in a bag of chips, but yet you still can't use professional applications on it. So
Well, and I think that's something that folks don't know about the early years of the Windows versus Mac wars. I mean, you mentioned it a little bit about some of the apps that people couldn't use early on. I remember, the other thing too being the even though Windows was modeled in a similar kind of fashion as early Apple operating systems, the experience of using them, having to know command lines to use a Windows computer versus a Mac where everything sort of quote unquote just work, even though half the time 90% of it really none of it worked.
yeah,
I think is something that you find so much less of today, right? There's so many better ways of understanding how to use these computers, as they're intended without having to sort of go behind the scenes. Not to mention the fact that with the exception of games, even then there's better cross platform functionality now. Everything is built for everything. And having an iPad now is almost like having a larger, dumber phone when our phones do so much more.
right. And the iPad came out when iPhones were 4.2-inch screens, or whatever that original iPad or iPhone screen size was. So it was iPhone 6, and then you get iPhone Plus models and Max models and all of this other stuff, and the line between them has definitely blurred to a point. But one thing that Apple does, and I think that Apple could look at what Windows does with their own hardware and learn a couple of things if they were at all interested, because they're making money hand over fist. So why change? But if you look at the Surface line of devices, you've got the Surface Pro line, and that is a tablet, it is a PC, it is a laptop, it's all of those things, and it runs full blown Windows. And then you've got the Surface Studio, which, I mean, you can argue about the hardware that they put inside is not what people who are going to spend $3,500 on a computer are going to want to have inside their computer. But the idea behind it, with the hinge and sort of just the way that everything is much more fluid in how it can go from one use to another, whereas Apple has segmented their product line so much that it's like the golden handcuffs. The iPad is now sort of in the middle in this gray area. They have one that's $300, and then they have one that's $2,200. You know, and
Yeah.
the $300 iPad is still great. I mean, you know, like, have that, read books on it, watch some YouTube videos, just, you know, graze content, and, you know, maybe read some emails or something. That's fine. But when Apple started telling us that the iPad was a computer, I was just kind of like, and that was what, like 4 or 5 years ago at this point? And that, but it's never,
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, sorry.
It's just never become, it's never paid off on that promise. Like, if, as an audio engineer, if I want to record on an iPad, I either have to use GarageBand, which is a fine program, but it is dumbed down for much more broad usage by a much more broad swath of people. And if you have experience as a professional in doing that stuff, it's almost like you have to go backwards and think of like what GarageBand is doing for you and how to make it stop, right? And but no other, you know, Logic doesn't exist on the iPad, and there's no Pro Tools, there's no, like, Ableton Live, there's no anything, there's no full version of any audio recording digital audio workstation on the Mac. And you would think, or on the iPad, and you would think Apple would recognize that the iPad, with its form factor and ease of use and portability and sort of modularity, would be something that musicians would love to be able to use. But in order to do it, you have to make all kinds of sacrifices and accept all kinds of limitations to do it. It's a little bit better on the video side because there are good video editing programs, but there's not Final Cut Pro, which is what a lot of people who edit on Mac have chosen to invest in. So to me, that's the problem with the iPad. And I think it does come from, you know, getting back to the contextual thing, it does come from, you know, 10 years ago, being one of the people in line at Best Buy to buy the iPad 2, you know, because it was just like the iPad was so exciting. But now it's most definitely not. That's
I hear you. I think it'll be interesting to see as Apple laptops get touchscreens, if that turns out to be sort of the bridge. You reminded me that when I was my first Comic-Con, which I think was 2009,
right.
I, through friendly offers from a booth next to the one that I was hanging out at, one of the giveaways they were doing was like 10 iPads, and the person running the booth that I talked about, it must have been 2010, because I think that's when the first iPad actually released. But somebody gifted me one of the iPads they were giving away. Is like, just pretend we drew your name out of a hat. You've been looking at this the whole time. Like, let me just give you one. And I remember loving it for the first 30 days and thinking, this is revolutionary. This is brilliant. I think that this is genius. And then not using it again after those 30 days.
Right.
And even now, owning an iPad, it's mostly a tool for either watching content or for my 2-year-old son to play his games. And I think it's really interesting to see that the product line transition may end up being that actually we're just going to end up making all the laptops that do have all of this technology built in and all of this strength be touchscreen, which is really essentially what they were trying to position iPads as 4 years ago.
Yeah. And the thing that's interesting, once Apple switched to their own ARM processors and those ARM processors are based on the same kind of platform that the iPad and iPhone processors were built on. And when they realized, like, oh, we could just take the laptop processor and put it in the iPad. I mean, that was on at first blush, you're like, oh, that's incredible, so much power, right? But then, what can you do with it? I don't think there's any program out there other. Maybe there's some CAD or graphic design programs out there that would put it to the test, but that's an incredibly very small niche market. For the majority of people who are buying a 12.9-inch iPad Pro at $1,300 plus a Magic Keyboard and an Apple Pencil, and all of a sudden you're getting close to $2,000. Most of those people are are just using it like they would use a laptop, and then getting frustrated when you can't fill out a form and you have to go to your real computer.
Yeah, I've had that experience more than once in a browser on my iPad.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, because I'd love to talk. I'd love to talk a little bit about your process. And I know that you've, the two sides of your work, as it was with our friend Jeff Mendez, El Jefe Reviews, is that you do both asynchronous recorded content as well as live. So I'd love for you to talk first actually about the live prep that you do, because I think that's a little bit different than what a lot of people expect out of reviewers. Do you do a lot of research about the products before you go live? You do your lives on Amazon, correct?
Yep. And a lot of what I do on Amazon, and you can do it a lot of different ways on any platform, but I try and talk about products that I really have personal experience with, or that have been sent to me and I've been able to vet them on some level. So most of the time I'm talking about something that I already know pretty well. And my goal is to just be conversational and try and be like that water cooler conversation, right? Where you're at the office and you're thinking about buying a new pair of headphones, and you ask your buddy who happens to know about headphones. That's kind of what I try and do with my Amazon streams. And I try, and it's, when I've done live stuff on YouTube as well, I try and be conversant, but I try not to be overly prepared, because I don't want to lose that conversational style. I feel like that's the benefit of a live setting, is that you get to see people interact as human beings, as opposed to something that's a little bit more curated.
I like that. I think there's something really interesting too about going live and being sort of solo, right? I mean, I think you see a lot of Twitch creators who they're playing a game when they're live, so there's action happening. When it's just you, though, you have to really fill the space. You have to drive the energy of the live, which is really, I've done it. It's challenging. The fact that you do it on a regular basis, I think, is a testament to the constitution it can take to do these kinds of lives.
And I can say that, most of the live stuff that I'd done prior to doing the Amazon thing had been sort of tandem live streams with another person, and there's really robust chat that's coming through, and so you have things to roll off of. But the Amazon stuff, when I first started doing it, it's not a really interactive live stream. It can be, and every once in a while you do get a bunch of people in there who are interacting, but for the most part it's you talking for an hour to an hour and a half. And when I first started doing it, it was exhausting. I was just like, I would get done and be just gassed and think to myself, I barely did anything. Why am I so worn out? But you have to think of what to say and keep your mouth moving all that time, and have the ideas still, like what you're saying, still makes sense and flow from one thing to the next. You've got to get your product segues in there. I do a lot of speaking of whatever. Here's this next product.
Another favorite I love. Yeah, I have some experience of. There's nothing good about hearing yourself say the same segues or transitions 4 or 5 times in a row, because you realize your brain is just stuck on it, and you realize in the post after you're just like, okay, there's only so many times I can say this next one's really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Exciting is one of those words that people often get stuck on too. And amazing. I used to teach public speaking. And one of the things that I really made people aware of was when they used sort of meaningless meaningless words that they were trying to use to express something, right? Express excitement or whatever. Amazing is a word that we use so often now in casual conversation that it's lost any real meaning. So when you say it, you're just kind of saying it to fill the space of a better word. and I taught that with when I taught writing as well, because a lot of times it's those small things, and this is what's universal about whether it's music or writing or public speaking or doing YouTube. What's universal about the different levels of I guess achievement or comfort or just acumen is that when you first start out, you would use those words, or you might use those phrases and not even think twice about it, because it was doing the job it needed to do, which was to get you from one place to the next. And only after you've done it so often and you get to the point where you can really recognize things that weren't visible to you before, you know. I remember I remember learning very specific things about like deeper and deeper levels of sentences when I was in grad school, like using more than one pronoun in a pronoun phrase. Yeah, you shouldn't do it. It weakens the language, but everybody does it until they have it pointed out to them. So yeah.
I'm going to apologize too. I don't know if you or other listeners can hear. Somebody has started power washing near me, and hopefully the noise reduction is working.
I don't hear it, so
even better. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your writing process. So you were mentioning before we started, you use a teleprompter. I know you do a lot of writing. You should say historically for your videos have done a lot of writing. Walk me through your process. Tell me about specifically how you outline and then how you get to a finished script.
Well, it usually starts with just an idea for a video. Yeah, so I use Notion. You can use any kind of note-taking thing or whatever you want to do. The most important thing that I learned over the years was always have something available to you to capture ideas. And so it might start with, I've captured the idea and I have a list of 20 video ideas. And then when I start to dig in, I might make a few bullet points of here are the 3 topics that I want to really hone in on. But for me, I think I'm comfortable enough as a writer to be able to write in the voice that I'm comfortable speaking in. And so that's why scripting works better for me than I think it does for some other people. But my main goal is really just to write, for all intents and purposes, an argumentative, persuasive essay. That's the way that I think about it, is, sort of setting up an argument and, having your refutations and all those different things. And of course you have to build in your, like, subscribe, bell, notify, all that kind of stuff. But
you got to have the voice for that. It's got to be like, subscribe, hit that bell. All right, here we go. Is that not what you do?
The painful thing on YouTube is when somebody says something like, you take the bell notification out into the backyard and kick it over the fence, or whatever it is that they say. It's like, no, just please, you just wasted 3 seconds of my life trying too hard. And
I hear that.
Yeah, there's so many little quirks and foibles on YouTube that, outside of the context of YouTube, don't make any sense at all. But they've become sort of the language of YouTube. And again, just like we were talking about with other things, You might use the word amazing and not realize that it doesn't mean anything. You might tell somebody to like or subscribe to your channel without realizing that it's not going to actually do that. Depending on when you deploy it and how you deploy it, it's not going to make that much of a difference. Like what I think people don't realize that if you ask people to like and subscribe before you give them any actual content that you've delivered on the promise of the video, then it's just annoying. If you ask for a like and a subscribe after you've introduced yourself, which you shouldn't do either, then most people have clicked off before 30 seconds are up. So
I'm doing it right by not doing that at the front, and actually realized after my last filming I didn't do it at all. Nailing it. I am nailing this. This is great.
The beauty of a pre-recorded podcast is that you can go back and do those things later.
Don't you worry, I will.
Anyway. Yeah, I usually forget too, honestly, because I never liked that aspect of it. It always felt like it really, if you're making a good argument or you're delivering good content on whatever way that you're trying to do it, and then you have to stop and do the infomercial to get people to like you, it just feels really weird. And I know that there are metrics out there that show that verbalizing something, reinforcing the ask does give you some kind of heightened result. But I don't know. I feel like each creator has to judge for themselves whether or not they feel comfortable making that ask in that way.
Well, but I think you've hit on an interesting idea here, which is also that audiences are unique. And even if one person is watching if two people are watching the same creator, they can have a very different feeling about that creator and those calls to action. Right. You and I have talked a lot about sort of, audience development and in particular, the challenges you've experienced over the last couple of years, which you've been very vocal about on your channel. Do you feel like this year you found a groove that lets you really focus less on audience growth and more just on building the content and maybe making those calls to action less necessary or pertinent?
Well, I think, so I went full-time as a content creator toward the end of 2019. And of course, then 2020 happened a couple of months later and everything just got sort of thrown up in the air. And that made me change my idea of what the value of what my content would be. Because before, I always like to try and get a rise out of people, some kind of an emotional reaction, whether it's, I really agree with this guy, or God, this guy's so stupid, whatever. I liked doing that. And I felt like making videos about whether or not the iPhone sucks because it doesn't have a 120 hertz screen was sort of pointless in the face of what was going on globally. And I really feel like 2022 was the year where things didn't necessarily get back to normal, but we were no longer it was no longer sort of an emergency situation, right? And I just found that I was being too precious about how I was, like, what I was allowing myself to put out as content. And this year I sort of told myself that I'm just gonna be a little bit more free and loose with, if I've got an idea, I'm not gonna sit there and think over it forever and, maybe just totally beat it into the ground before I ever get it on film. Like today I made a video about how I think the iPad should go away. We were talking about it earlier. And, last year I might have thought about that to the point of not making the video. And so I'm just trying to be a little bit more first thought, best thought, kind of just allowing myself to, if the channel's called Painfully Honest Tech, then I want it to still have that, to be challenging to the viewer. And, as we've talked about different ways that we could do that, different styles of content, that kind of thing. But But for me, in the early weeks of 2023, I've just allowed myself to just kind of make the content in a much freer, more comfortable way where I'm not so worried about what people might think or whether or not it's appropriate.
Which I imagine, I mean, if for no other reason than to give yourself a little bit more, grace and flexibility, that's probably got to feel better, right? Maybe it's too early to tell if that's going to resonate with audiences, and there's lots of other factors that can determine whether that results in sort of, the up and to the right metrics that you're looking for. But in the end, being comfortable with who you are on camera, being comfortable with the experience of recording, and then ultimately being maybe prouder and happier with what you're producing is a huge advantage. That even if it doesn't result in immediate changes in your metrics, it really results in happiness, which ultimately drives better creative content.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. It's a couple of different things. If you're excited about the content that you make, then you're more likely to have an idea, get excited about it, sit down and make a video. But if you just have a list of videos that you need to make, it's not the same kind of thing, And as a professional, in anybody in any professional outlet will have things that they need to do but don't want to do, or maybe it's not their favorite thing to do. In baseball parlance, when my channel started to take off, I fell in love with the home run ball, and I just wanted to hit for the fences every single time, even though I told myself not to do it. But every time it came back around to like, oh, you should make some of that evergreen content, headphone reviews or whatever. You should do some of that so that, when this starts to go down the other side of the mountain, you'll have content there that's still plugging away. But I didn't do that. I just kept trying to hit the home run. And I think everybody is probably prone to want to do that. I mean, I started YouTube and with really very few expectations for what it would be. And it wasn't really until I'd been doing it for several years that I kind of was like, if I got more serious and organized about this, I might be able to really make something out of it. And that was like middle of 2016. I'd run for office 3 times in 18 months and lost all the elections. Ran for school board twice and county supervisor once. And so I was just like, I think the world is telling me something. They're not ready for the painfully honest.
I don't know. Supervisor Lewis does sound like a great title that I might go for more than once. I get that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I'm still young-ish. So
I'm not that far behind you. Let me just be clear. And if anybody's listening who's like, these guys are not that old, we're not. I just want to be really upfront about that.
I like to think that 50 is the new 30. So,
and 30 is the new 11, at least from a maturation perspective. Yeah. So I think we're right there.
I think most American males are actually just like arrested development at the age of 12. Like,
yeah, I that's a different conversation for another day. But yes, to the point you were making before, you'd run for office a few times and had not coalesced.
Yeah. And so I decided I was just gonna step away from that civic visible life and sort of, I hadn't made YouTube videos for like 6 months. So I was like, okay, I'm going to rededicate myself to YouTube. I'm going to be very deliberate about it. And I'm going to do that for as long as I can do it. And we'll see what happens. So I decided July of 2016, I was going to make 3 videos a week, every week. As of course there were weeks that maybe that didn't happen, but the goal was 3 videos a week. And I started to do that. And I think at that time I had below 30,000 subscribers. So the channel had gotten a little bit of momentum, but it wasn't anything like I wasn't in a position to like quit my job or anything. And that wasn't even something that I was thinking about. But I just wanted to really dedicate myself to the creative process of doing those 3 videos and see what happened on the other end. And lo and behold, by 2018, by middle of 2018, 2 years later, I'd gone from 30,000 subscribers to 125,000 subscribers. I'd had a video that had done 1.4 million views, and several others that had, that had gone over 500K. And so I was like, oh, okay. But at the same time, that was, I've said this to people in private before, and because I have a feeling it will come across to people in the wrong way. But the worst thing that ever happened to my channel, at least at the time that it happened, was having a video get 1 million views. Because it, my channel was still relatively small, and I thought like a smaller creator. I hadn't been in that 1 million plus view stratosphere, so I didn't know how to breathe correctly up there. And as soon as I got up there, I just felt like I had to keep flapping my wings to stay up there, and I kind of lost focus on what had gotten me there in the first place, which was 3 videos a week, and a nice balance of reviewing some products and doing some opinion related stuff, and just finding different ways to do different things with different content. And so I like that thus began my 3 years in the wilderness of just not really knowing what to do, and like having to accept that at least at this point right now, my channel isn't going to command that level of views on any kind of regular basis. And it, it's kind of, it's the wrong thing to focus on anyway, because you can get 1 million views on one video, or you can get 1 million views on 100 videos. Still 1 million views.
Yeah.
And so 1 million views on 100 videos would probably go a long way toward making you a better creator than 1 million views on one video would. And that's my friend Tech Odyssey. He grinds harder than I've ever known anybody else in the tech space. I don't know enough about other YouTubes to say, but he makes a video a day at least, sometimes like 3 videos a day, and he's been doing it. I first met him at CES 2023 in person, or 2020, but I knew him before that, and at that time he didn't even have 10,000 subscribers, I don't think, but he has since just grinded. He's making these videos. He's not trying to swing for the fences. He's just making videos about the stuff that he thinks his audience is going to be interested in. And he went over 100,000 subs not too long ago, and I think he's on his way to 120 right now, a few months later. And we've talked in the past, and this is something that is a worthy conversation in the YouTube circles, is like, well, what kind of a metric is subscribers? And 100K subscribers is a vanity metric, because you get the silver, like, aluminum plaque.
It's right behind you. I mean, for those of us watching online, it's literally right there. Yeah.
I tried to make it look gold. But you get that, and that's super exciting, and it is like a great achievement. It's something that I never anticipated, going there and having that happen. Because when I was watching YouTube videos and I would see people with play buttons, I'd be like, wow, that's a lot. But beyond that, the subscriber metric is kind of soft. It doesn't really show anything, although you can maybe use it as like a finger in the wind to see which way the wind is blowing. If you're losing subs, maybe you're not doing something right, but who knows? At this point, I think it becomes less important post 100K, because post 100K, you're working with much larger numbers, and shifts in much larger numbers are much less visible than they would be otherwise. And so it's just really hard to use that as a barometer, and you have to go to other metrics to see, like, to see what's working and what's not. And I'm terrible with metrics of any kind. I'm the guy who took like math history in college to meet my math requirement. Like,
Wait, is that a thing? Math
yeah,
history?
yeah, yeah. We called it math for artists and athletes. And
Wow. I mean, I've heard of rocks for jocks, and I think we had
yeah,
an
I
English
did
class.
that too.
English,
That's
yeah,
how
okay,
that's how I satisfied my science requirement,
there you go.
geology. Um, but yeah, so I'm terrible with math, but I've 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 come to be I've come to like be able to look at YouTube stuff and be like, okay, YouTube does enough with like green check marks and gray down arrows to let me know that things are going well or they aren't.
Yeah,
But I think
I dig it.
ultimately people get caught up in that stuff and the run up to, like, if you're really serious about YouTube and you get some momentum going and you're on the run up to 100,000 subs or 10,000 subs or 50,000 subs, like it becomes pretty all encompassing, and it's hard to get out of the mindset once you get past those benchmarks.
Yeah.
And yeah, they say that I heard this statistic recently. The length of the average creator's career is something like 3 to 5 years, which makes sense. I mean, it's very hard to do. Being a creator of anything and making it something that you can continue to do is really hard, because being a creator is like 98% rejection all the time.
Yeah.
And
Well, and as a
good.
writer, you have experience with that. As a former actor, I have experience with that. I mean, it's whether you're dealing with audiences that don't respond or brands that don't reply or deals that fall through, right? Rejection is a constant in this work. And the challenge of that is learning to have the thick skin to respond to it.
And some people don't. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would never, I think, okay, one of my teachers in grad school, fantastic writer named Chris Offutt, he, very early in the semester where I took his writing workshop, he said to the whole class, he's like, okay, if you're sitting in this room right now and you can do anything other than write and be happy with your life, go do that, because you will be miserable as a writer. But if you can't do anything else and be happy with who you are and feel like you're living out what you need to live out, then go be an insurance adjuster. A lot of people graduate from MFA programs and become lawyers. So but that was like one of the best pieces of advice that I heard, that I think is worth considering, because it's not that you shouldn't make YouTube videos or write novels or write songs. It's just that they don't have to be what defines you. I mean, we all live in a world now where there's enough spare time that you can sneak in an hour or two several times a week to do something that you really like, and you don't have to kill yourself over if that's what you're okay with. But I mean, I started performing in front of people when I was 8 years old, and was in my first band when I was 14, and now I'm 51, and I've never not been a creative person. And of all people, I was this is an interesting combo. I watched a little piece of an interview with, so it was Joe Rogan interviewing Henry Rollins, right? And Joe Rogan talking about how the fact where that when he was a teenager, he just realized that he could never really like have a real job, because he wasn't wired for it. And Henry Rollins, of course, it is like the king of that kind of person, right? And it just made me think like I'd always felt that way as well. I haven't had the level of success or monetary or otherwise that either of them have, but I knew that I had to find a way to keep doing it. And so YouTube was online video was not on the roadmap in any way, shape, or form. But it just was a right time, right place sort of thing for me, where it fit better than I thought it would. And online video developed and matured itself enough where once I got tired of just sort of iterating a single kind of video, like a review or something like that, and I wanted to stretch out and do more opinion based stuff and challenge people's thought processes, online video had sort of expanded to the point where there was more of an audience for that. And that's again like kind of what I'm trying to get back to now, is to really engage and challenge that audience. And yeah, I mean, I think 20 years from now we're gonna look at sort of pandemic and post-pandemic creativity and life, and there will be some very obvious sort of just hiccups. I honestly think that the pandemic is probably pandemic, world wars, and the Great Depression. Those are the things that will impact the day-to-day life of the average citizen to a point where nothing is like it was before that happened. And so it seems like something like that happens every 50 years or 40 years or so. And I think 25 years from now we'll look back on 2020 and the ensuing years and be like, oh, I now see patterns that began there, that developed into this, that, or the other thing. And so it's really interesting to me to have lived through that, and to have made such a big life choice and going full time. I quit my job. It was a job that I could have worked easily until retirement. Gotten great health care, good, I was working for a Big Ten university, and I had career status, which was sort of the professional equivalent of tenure. So I stepped away from that to do this creative thing because I had always wanted to live and die off of my creativity. And I was 48 years old, and just kind of all of a sudden, all the plans, the best laid plans, et cetera, just became something else. But I'm still here, paying the bills.
And that's not nothing. I mean, I think it's worth acknowledging for a moment that that's a Herculean task that you achieved. And even if things didn't proceed, particularly during and after the pandemic, that they didn't match the expectations you had when you first started. You and I talked about this before. It's a little bit, you've lived your own hero's journey of having left your comfort zone and descended through Tartarus and come back, and you're back to where you were now. And now it's a new cycle. I think it's not small. And I think it's worth recognizing and appreciating that's what you went through in the last few years would have driven a lot of people back to that comfortable job.
Yeah, I guess I guess well, let's say this. If I wasn't who I am, then I probably could have. I might have actually done so. But I'm not the easiest person to get along with in the workplace. I'm not like, I don't rage at people or do anything like that, but I found that I'm not people's favorite coworker. And so
I find that difficult to believe. I do, because you might be opinionated, you might have strong feelings about things, but you're not a antisocial individual.
Yeah, I might have become more so in the workplace. You know, I stopped going to the birthday lunches and all of those things, and just kind of stayed in my office. And yeah, but no, I actually, there were a couple of times where I thought about, like, oh, I could just do something part time and that would take the pressure off. But then something would always come along.
Yeah.
Although I have taken sort of a part time job. I'm going to be an instructor at the local School of Rock.
I love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that.
So, yeah,
Okay.
I had actually probably 5 or 6 years ago had actually reached out to the company that franchises the School of Rock, and looked into opening one in this area. But at the time, the closest they could, they had all these metrics that had, population density and income and all that kind of stuff. The closest place was like 2.5 hours away. So, so I was like, well, I'll put that on the shelf for a while. But in between, somebody was able to get, well, this is the one that's here is his second School of Rock franchise. And so when I saw that there was one, we just moved to a new town, not far away from where we were. I just sent him an email and said, I've done all these things. I can play all of these instruments. And I think it would be really cool to just, you know, offer my services in whatever way I can. Because one downside of the solo creator thing is total isolation. Like, I mean, I have calls, Zoom calls and live streams and stuff where I talk to people, but by and large, I don't leave my house other than to, go shopping or go pick up my grandson at daycare or whatever. And, the pandemic reinforced that, right? So just the idea of getting out and commingling with other humans that actually have the same interests that I do, just kind of got me excited about it. So I went. They wrote back and were like, "Yeah, come for an interview." So I went over there, and it's it's really interesting. I mean, most people have probably had experience taking music lessons of some kind, and you go for half an hour, and you sit there and you play through whatever book you have. Well, with School of Rock, you don't only take private lessons, individualized lessons, but you're also part of a group that's going to perform at like the end of a 3 month span or something. So you're learning like Boston, like the guitar part to a Boston song in order to go do that live, which I just think is, something about getting on stage with an instrument or as a singer or whatever it is like the is the hardest crucible to walk through. Because I remember the first time I got on stage, like I I was 14 years old. I had just, like, it was the beginning of my sophomore year in high school, and I was playing with this band that had invited me to sing with them at at a at an event called Coal Aid. It was in support of striking miners. I grew up in West Virginia, so and
I was going to say it sounded like it was either pro or against coal mining. I'm glad to hear it was against.
well, no, it was pro workers.
Pro workers.
Yeah,
Let's be clear. It's pro
but if
workers.
if
Yeah.
if you if you live in West Virginia, it's really very few people are anti-coal. I mean, there are plenty of people who aren't involved in the coal industry who recognize, like, yeah, that's not so good. But it was the only thing. It was the only game in town for a century. And so I just remember, like, the band that was playing before us was on stage, and I just was so nervous that I had like explosive diarrhea. Like I had to run to the bathroom and just be like, oh, and then 10 minutes later get on stage. And I just think that crucible of walking up there, you see people out there or you don't see people out there. Either one is just as equally as frightening. And your mind goes blank and you don't know if you're going to be able to do anything. And then suddenly, the drummer counts 4 and you're off. And I think that experience for kids who, in this day and age, God, that's such an old man phrase. Jesus.
Back in my day. Yeah, I gotcha. That's
but
right.
I don't think the neighborhood kids starting a garage band is something that happens as often as maybe it did when I was younger.
Yeah.
So this gives kids an opportunity to do that without, really without having to go through all of that social rigmarole.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Well, I'm sure you wouldn't do it if it wasn't.
Well.
I want to talk, we've a little bit of time left. I want to talk through your technical setup because I think one of the things that I find most interesting about chatting with content creators is what's the hardware that they're using. So walk me through a little bit. I'm looking at your setup right now, so it's not going to be difficult to sort of get a sense of it, but take me through your cameras and where they're set up. What's your mic setup? Give me your lighting. Give me the whole shebang.
Sure. So this whole setup, this is exclusively for video. I'm in a space now where I can have a completely other desk that I can have as whatever I want, but I've got over here an SL120 from Neewer. It's a less expensive aperture 120D. I've got 27-inch monitor over here, iPad in front of me. My main camera is a Sony A7 III. And then up here, it's an A7C. I sold my A7 III because my overhead camera is just a Sony ZV-1. And I just found that the A7C was a really expensive camera that I probably wasn't using for enough to, and I wasn't using it enough to really justify the expenditure. But I specifically wanted to get as good as I could a camera setup, and then hopefully not get into that like chasing the camera dragon thing.
I have to pause for a second. Did you just get notifications on iMessage?
I did. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I thought that was me. I'm going to keep that in the recording because that's too funny. Because I just spent the last 3 seconds being like, who is, like, I'm not seeing anything. And I realized you're using a Rodecaster. So I must be getting all of your audio from your computer right now.
Yeah, you might be. Yeah, my wife
amazing.
was just texting about dinner.
That's funny. Okay. I just thought for a minute, I'm like, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, that's in the mix. And that's great. I love that.
So the cameras are all going into an A10 Mini that I just use as a switcher. I've also used the Elgato Camlinks. I've also used the Elgato Camlink Pro, which is like a 4-input HDMI switcher. But right now I'm using a Mac Mini, like just a base model Mac Mini as my video setup. And it only has one USB bus. So it does not like to have more than one cam link plugged into it, which is why I'm using the A10. Rodecaster Pro 2 is my audio mixer / sound trigger / everything. I have 2 mics plugged into it, SM7B for the more podcasty kind of thing. And then I have a Shure or a Sennheiser MKV something. It's it's not the really expensive Sennheiser mic that everybody gets, but it's basically the same thing, but only $300.
Right. And that's a shotgun.
Yeah. So I have that. That's like right out of the frame right here. And so when I'm using that, I just take my SM7 and I swing it off out of the way. Then I have a bunch of lights. So all of the lights that are lighting the background are Philips Hue. I know some creators say that they have problems with Philips Hue being wavy or whatever, but I've never had that problem. And then I have a backlight, like a fill light that's hitting a hair light, I guess they call it, which is always weird to me. It's a hair light mounted on the ceiling just to sort of separate me from the background. And when I wear black and background is black, I mean, you need everything.
What's the line from Spinal Tap? It's blacker than black. It's as black gets.
Yes,
you gotta add that distinction.
Yes, yeah. In fact, I thought about getting the blackest black paint, but it doesn't come in gallons.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
really
so
expensive.
It's probably. I was going to say it's probably an arm and a leg.
Yeah. So I just got Home Depot's flat black interior, like flat paint. Yeah. So it's
nice.
Yeah. But this is the first time that I've had a space that was mine to do whatever I wanted to, and it's an actual. It's not a dingy basement. It's not a garage space. It's an actual, air conditioned, heated. I've got rugs and all that kind of stuff. There's no exposed 2x4s. So this is the first time that I've had an actual like comfortable space to do this work in. And I used to do a lot of it in my bedroom, but found that once you get to the place where you have multiple lights and multiple cameras and all these things, it's either tear it down and set it up all the time, or find a place to set it up and leave it. And there's a huge, if you want to create content for YouTube or for TikTok or for like all of the above, the value of having a setup where you can just sit down and go is immeasurable. I get so much more done now that it's just a sit down and press record kind of situation than I ever did before. So I would say if you're out there and you're looking for a little nugget of advice, find yourself a place to have everything set up so that you don't have to do anything but hit record.
As somebody who records in his living room, as you can hear now, that is totally sound treated, I am envious. That's great. It is what it is. All right. One last question for you, sir. If you were to go back in time and you were to find the Jason Lewis of yesteryear who was just about to get started down this path, is there a piece of advice or a warning that you would offer him about what's coming?
Yes. Don't be so precious about opportunities, because you never know what an opportunity is potentially going to lead to. And when I was younger, I was very much like, it's my way or the highway. I want to write and perform my own songs in my own way, and I had opportunities to do things like audition for Rent, audition for American Idol in the initial years, things that I could have done, but I was like, no way, man, that's not cool or whatever. And so there were several things that I didn't do. When I lived in New York City, I lived in New York City for 11 years. And there were several things that I didn't do that I think I would go back and say, just do it. You can always say no, and that's that's something that unfortunately, I think that's something that comes with age. You know, the youth is wasted on the young, my friend.
Boy, don't I know that.
Yeah. I also would tell myself to practice guitar more as a younger person. So
yeah, I think that's one we can all certainly get behind. I am musically lacking, and practice would have helped. Yeah, that's all right. Very cool. This has been a tremendous pleasure. I really do appreciate the time. If folks want to, what's the best place to find you online? Where do you want to drive folks to?
Well, Painfully Honest Tech on YouTube is probably the place where, I'm most active in terms of putting out content. So all you have to do in order to find that is start typing Painfully Honest. And I'm usually, by the time you get done with Painfully, I'm one of the top things. So find me there at the Jason T. Lewis on Twitter, Painfully Honest Tech on Instagram, Painfully Honest Tech on TikTok, and other places. But yeah, YouTube is still the main platform. But you can also follow me on Amazon, Painfully Honest Tech on Amazon for the live streams. I always forget to include that one for some reason. So yeah,
I'll make sure we link it. That's great.
Thanks.
Very cool, man. Well, thank you for the time. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll have you back in some time to see how this year's been progressing, if you're interested.
I'd love it for sure. Yeah.
Sounds good.
That'd be great. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Well, I guess that's it. I really don't know how to end these episodes. So I guess at some point I'll just keep talking and I'll fade music over this part. At some point. No, we're just going to